The a7S might be dead, but long live the low-light king.
To begin our story of what happened, we need to rewind a little. In April of 2014, Sony announced the a7S.
Optimized for sensitivity and dynamic range.
Its real party trick is its phenomenal low light capability.
Now 9 years later, this feels like a lifetime ago, but just to paint the picture here, at this point it was being compared to cameras such as the Panasonic GH4 and the Canon 5D Mark III. Mirrorless was still a novel concept at this point. And I really want to drive this home. The a7S was a big deal at the time. While it lacked internal 4K recording, it could be done externally through a monitor recorder like the Animus Ninja. And while it did sacrifice megapixel count for photos, this meant it could capture its video with a full readout of the sensor, as opposed to line skipping like most of the other cameras did at the time.
Better than the 5D Mark III in low light?
If you've got a 5D Mark III, sell it now, buy one of these.
It was full frame, could see in the dark, hence the S for sensitivity, and included features such as focus peaking and zebras. Therefore, it was clear that Sony wanted this to be for video shooters to lure them away from Canon's DSLR lineup. Now, I sat in this same room in 2014 and reviewed this camera coming from the Canon 60D. Watching that video back, for some research of course, I love the image quality, but I had some areas of feedback I wish they'd improve upon. I said the battery life wasn't great, the ergonomics were challenged, and the lens selection at the time was slim. And Sony knew that too. For context, they literally threw in a Metabones adapter for Canon EF lenses, which got me to buy it in the first place. But the simple fact is, I loved my a7S. Unlike Canon, who intentionally cripple their cameras to protect their cinema lineup. And that has filmmakers fed up and moving away from Canon. Yeah, and as a side note, I ended up replacing my a7S with a Canon C200, which was literally another hampered Canon camera. Toxic relationships are hard to leave sometimes. But Sony didn't rest on its laurels. Cut to 1 year later in 2015, and they announced the a7S Mark II. Better ergonomics, internal 4K recording up to 30p, image stabilization, and now S-Log3 for better dynamic range. I never owned this camera, but I remember being really tempted to upgrade. Still, with my Mark I doing the job, I just thought, I'll wait for the Mark III. For 5 years, there were constant rumors and hope a new version would arrive. Sony did keep making cameras, but the a7S seemed to be long forgotten. And then finally, it happened. On my birthday, in the middle of a pandemic in 2020, Sony announced the a7S Mark III. Internal 4K up to 120 frames per second, 10-bit codec options, an articulating screen, dual card slots, better menu, bigger batteries, and an amazing new autofocus system. It was kind of like a birthday wish come true. But it wasn't long before there was a new kid on the block, the FX6. Basically the a7S III in a video camera body. And together they seemed to make the perfect pairing. Two matched video focused cameras with different form factors, one had internal NDs and the other had internal image stabilization. And by January 2021, I'd acquired both. And that brings us to 1 month later, in Feb 2021, and Sony announced the FX3. It's an a7S III, but they made it look like an FX6. At the time I debated whether to sell my new a7S and upgrade to it, but in the end, besides the XLR handle, it just seemed like the same camera. But now 2 years on, the FX3 has had several big updates which make it much more capable as a video camera. 4K DCI internally, something they said the a7S III couldn't do because of its sensor design. Looking at you, Sony. Anamorphic D-squeeze, breathing compensation, Cine eye modes, custom LUTs, for what is effectively the same camera as the a7S III. So why didn't it get the same features? Well, 9 years on from 2014, the game has changed. Now basically every camera manufacturer has a capable mirrorless camera that can shoot 4K, 6K, or even 8K video. The a7S was a game changer of the time, but the Mark III has kind of reached an impasse. Sony wants to create a cinema lineup of cameras with the Venice, FX9, FX6, and the FX3, and also a low-end vlogging lineup with, most recently, the ZV-E1, which is an a7S III but in vlogging form. So where does this leave the a7S? Because it's now a camera in search of a customer that no longer seems to exist. I get it, a7S III owners aren't happy that Sony is giving all these new features to the FX3 and not our camera. But I also see their point in a way. They need to find a way to differentiate these different cameras and give people the reason to spend more on the FX3. And for vloggers, the ZV-E1 is a cheaper option for people who don't need features like anamorphic D-squeeze or Cine EI modes. It's upsetting, but Sony care more about new customers than existing customers. Updating the a7S III signals something to the market, and if they were to give it 4K DCI, why would a new customer want to spend more on the FX3? Now, I want to be clear here, I'm not apologizing for Sony, and they do risk losing customers if they don't look after their flagship products. But don't forget, the a7S III is still a great camera in 2023. I prefer the EVF, which the FX3 doesn't have, and I don't need 4K DCI or LUT support in camera. And overall, I purchased it knowing what it could do and wasn't hopeful it would keep getting new features. It's only the FX3 which has made us all realize it's technically capable of much more.
It's important to remember when you purchase something, it should be for what it is now and not what it's promised or assumed it will become. The a7S III is an amazingly capable camera and I've loved using it for my work. I literally have no plans to buy an FX3 anytime soon. But the Mark III may also be the last of its kind, the end of an era. Where the S once stood for sensitivity and signified a capable video camera, in 2023, everything's a capable video camera. Now for Sony, the FX stands for cinema, the ZV stands for vlogging, and the S, well, it stands for
around me, where there's nothing but the breeze and the great unknown. Leave your worries and your suitcase. All you don't need, nothing but you.
Alright, testing 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3, testing. I'm Matt, and this is Q Time.